I'm Dr. Hayslett, and I'm here to talk to you about the 9-10 MTSU Mid-State Audition. The scales are pretty well outlined. It gives you all the scales in 2 octaves with a suggested marking of at least 100. My suggestion to you would be to aim for 120 to the quarter note if that is comfortable. If you know you're going to play faster in the audition than what you practiced, then perhaps stick with 100 as your baseline, but still practice it at 120 so that you're able to play it faster when the time comes. Be sure that you're working on all of the scales. Spend time on the ones that you don't want to practice. Let's be real, there's a lot of flats and there's a lot of sharps in some of those, but don't give up on them and don't save them for later just because we know that they're going to take more brain power. Be sure to dig into those early. Now, this excerpt, I would recommend to use the fingerings that are printed. I'll play through this so we have a sense of what this sounds like. So some of the pitfalls here, obviously we're going to have intonation issues. Remember your G sharps, be sure they're not too sharp. This is a great excerpt to play with an A natural drone throughout, just as when you are practicing your scales. One of the great tools we have are drones. You can search for any of the drones on YouTube. Just look up cello drones followed by the note that you want. Cello drones A, and then you will get a 3 to 4 minute clip of just the note A for you to use as a drone. And that note will work throughout this whole excerpt pretty much. In measure 13 and 14, you might benefit from using perhaps an F sharp or an F sharp. That is what I would recommend. Use an F sharp on that. I was wondering if maybe a B would work, but I think F sharp would be best for measure 13 and 14 as you are working out that intonation. Our dynamics are pretty defined here. Mezzo forte, mezzo piano. We have a forte, we also have a piano. We have 4 different levels. So you have to know what you're going to change physically about your technique to make those dynamics happen. And we have to feel what those differences are. So I would start with piano and I would find, what does my piano sound like? What does it feel like? So piano, I will go to measure 13. How much weight, how much speed am I giving? I would not play this up over the fingerboard because I still want core in my tone. So I'm going to manage the dynamic differences mainly with speed and weight. So if that's my piano, then I'm going to go to my forte. What's the most sound that I need to give? If that is piano, where is my forte? And that forte occurs in measure 9. So I'm going to go there and I'm going to play measure 9 and 10 and see the weight and speed as it relates to the piano that I just played. I'm trying not to go for an ugly sound, just a big sound. You might notice my speed is certainly faster, and because of that, I'm going to have to add more weight. Now, I need to add in a mezzo piano and a mezzo forte level between those two. So I'm going to go from that forte down to mezzo forte, which is the very beginning. And then I'm going to go to my mezzo piano, which is in measure 7. And then I will do my piano one more time to check in that I still have room to go down to piano. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that every day. Just check in on those dynamic levels to be sure that I am physically feeling a difference. It should be relatively visible on camera without the sound, in fact. Based on how fast your bow is moving, you can't really see how much weight you have in the string, but certainly you can see the speed. Then that should give you a clue as to what the dynamic is of the music that's being played at that moment. Now, for some shifting help, first of all, before the shifting, extensions. Be sure that as we are extending, we are opening between 1 and 2. We are not reaching forward from 1 and rotating our hand and flattening our fingers. That's not going to be as efficient as if we just take our hand and we open our first finger to a whole step. This is what we are trying to do. Not reach with 2, 3, 4, but open back with 1. So to get that C sharp at the very beginning, I'm going to open here and move my 1 directly over to keep in this position. Now when I shift in measure 3, I'm going to find that note by thinking about where my 3rd finger is in my old position. I'm going to try and hit that spot. Now, I was just a little bit sharp, so I would need to practice this spot more to be sure that I could get it every single time. But I'm going to use that 3rd finger as my GPS. I'm going to use the open A as my opportunity to shift. And then my 4th finger E can pop down right there. We don't have that advantage in measure 5 to find that F sharp. So I'm going to rely on where my thumb is and how my 4th finger is going to relate to my thumb. The other thing I'm going to be thinking of is this A that matches our open A. That's where my 2nd finger is going to go. So that's what I will use for my GPS in measure 5. That's pretty much the main GPS issues. On the last line, we go up to the F sharp in measure 13. I'm just going to use my knowledge of 4th position, thumb in the crook of the cello to find that. And then the harmonic A, I'm going to keep my thumb back here. Keep your thumb. I don't need to point. I don't need to do anything funny with my wrist. I can keep my wrist straight and get up to that harmonic. And then I have to come back to where I know my 1st finger in 4th position, or my E is. I'm going to take a little mental picture about where that is. And that's where my 4th finger is going to go for the rest of the shifting. The last thing that I want to talk about is the hairpins. Be sure that on each of those hairpins, you are getting up to at least 1 dynamic above what is marked. So in measure 2, the downbeat is going to need to be forte. So when I'm doing my dynamic practice, I can actually write in all of the dynamics at the top of those hairpins and then include the notes in the middle of the hairpins, just that note in my dynamic practice, so that I get used to, okay, the downbeat of measure 2 is forte. What does that feel like? So that I can be sure that my hairpin is taking me to that forte and then coming back. If you have any other questions about this or any comments or concerns, feel free to email me, bryan.hayslett@mtsu.edu. And otherwise, happy practicing.